In the breath before dawn, when mist still holds the mountains close, stone rests on stone in perfect silence. The city sleeps beneath clouds that have drifted here for centuries, perhaps millennia, carrying rain from the Amazon basin to these peaks where green and gray dissolve into each other. Terraces descend like whispers into fog. No mortar binds the walls, only the patience of hands that understood how rock speaks to rock, how weight becomes belonging when placement honors shape. The stones remember their fitting, the way they were turned and turned again until surfaces met without space between, without need for anything but their own embrace. This is Machu Picchu, the old peak, though the name itself may be younger than the forgetting. The city was hidden not by decree, but by absence. When the last footsteps faded from these plazas, the jungle waited. Vines advanced slowly, year by patient year. Moss softened edges, rain polished the granite, and the granite absorbed the rain, holding moisture in its gray depths the way stone holds time. For generations, the terraces grew wild. Trees stretched roots through ancient doorways. The city became threshold between worlds, between what was built and what grows, between memory and silence, between the seen and the unseen. If mountains dream, perhaps they dream of this, the patient return of green over gray, the slow exhale of civilizations into leaves and air. The light begins to rise. 500 years of stillness. And beneath the stillness, a question suspended in stone. Who lifted these blocks into clouds, and why did they build a city the world would forget? The answer drifts through layers, through what is known, what is believed, and what can only be imagined in the space where history fades into the luminous territory of maybe. Most scholars place Machu Picchu's construction in the mid-15th century, roughly between 1450 and 1470, during the reign of Pachacuti, Inca Yupanqui, the ninth ruler of the Inca Empire. Evidence suggests the estate served multiple purposes: a royal retreat, an astronomical observatory, perhaps a ceremonial center aligned with the movements of sun and stars. The site occupies a saddle between two peaks in the eastern Cordillera of southern Peru, about 2,430 meters above sea level, where the high Andes begin their descent toward the Amazon rainforest. The location was not random. Archaeologists believe the Inca chose this ridge for its proximity to sacred peaks, its access to water from natural springs, and its visibility of celestial events important to Andean cosmology. The construction required the transport of granite blocks, some weighing 50 tons or more, up steep mountain paths where a single misstep meant falling into the Urubamba River thousands of feet below. Researchers propose that workers used log rollers, rope networks, and earthen ramps to move these stones, though the exact methods remain partially obscured by time. The Inca possessed no written language as Europeans understood it, keeping records instead through quipu, knotted string systems that encoded numerical and perhaps narrative information. Without written construction logs, the city's biography must be read in stone itself, in the wear patterns on stairs, in the alignment of windows with solstice sunrises, in the layers of pottery fragments found beneath terraces. The granite was quarried locally, extracted from the mountain's own flesh. Workers split stone using bronze tools and the expansion of wet wooden wedges driven into natural fractures. Each block was then shaped through patient percussion, struck again and again until surfaces achieved the precise angles needed for their destined position in a wall or temple. The finest examples of this craft appear in the Temple of the Sun, where stones flow together in curves that seem almost liquid, as if the granite were once soft and has only recently hardened into its present form. Archaeologists examining these joints have found them so precise that a knife blade cannot slide between blocks, a testament to expertise developed over generations of stonework across the expanding empire. But Machu Picchu was never a lost city in the sense the popular imagination suggests. Local Quechua-speaking communities always knew these ruins existed, though the site held little economic value after abandonment. It was lost only to the European and North American world, unknown to colonial Spanish records, unmarked on maps drawn by foreign hands. Some researchers believe this absence from Spanish documents indicates the city was already empty when conquistadors arrived in the 1530s, its purpose already fulfilled or abandoned due to circumstances the stone does not reveal. The jungle kept the secret. Farmers occasionally cultivated the ancient terraces, and travelers passed nearby without recording what they saw, or perhaps without seeing much through the perpetual mist that veils these heights. Then in 1911, Hiram Bingham, an American historian from Yale University, was guided to the ruins by local residents, particularly a farmer named Melchor Arteaga. Though Bingham later promoted himself as the city's discoverer, he was merely the first to bring news of Machu Picchu to an international audience, to photograph its terraces and temples, and to initiate the decades of archaeological investigation that would follow. The scientific work revealed a complex settlement with distinct sectors, residential areas for nobility and workers, agricultural terraces capable of feeding perhaps 750 permanent residents, ceremonial spaces oriented toward astronomical events, and sophisticated water management systems that still function after 5 centuries of abandonment. The site's hydrology speaks to planning that understood the mountain's moods. Stone channels carry spring water through the city in a carefully engineered sequence, flowing first to the emperor's residence, then cascading through 16 ceremonial fountains, each slightly lower than the last, finally dispersing into agricultural areas where the water would feed crops grown on hundreds of stepped terraces. This system required intimate knowledge of the annual rainfall patterns, the dry season's duration, and the capacity of springs that emerge from the mountain's interior. Everything was designed for permanence, for generations that would flow through these spaces like water through channels, repeating rituals that aligned human time with the slower rhythms of stars and seasons. Evidence suggests most residents were not Inca nobility, but retainer families, craftspeople, farmers, priests, and servants who maintained the estate when Pachacuti was absent. Skeletal remains found in burial caves around the site show a diverse population, though bioarchaeological studies indicate these were not local people. They came from various regions of the empire, brought here to serve in what scholars increasingly believe was a sacred landscape, a mountain sanctuary where the earthly realm approached the cosmic order the Inca sought to mirror in stone. And yet for all the evidence, for all the pottery shards and architectural precision, one question remains suspended above the terraces like morning mist. Why did they leave? The Spanish never conquered Machu Picchu because they never found it. The city was abandoned from within, emptied by choice or necessity before European steel ever reached these heights. The light reaches noon over the ridges. Beyond what the data can show, beyond the reach of excavation and analysis, the story softens into the realm of educated imagination. Perhaps the abandonment followed Pachacuti's death, when the estate lost its royal patron, and the complex web of obligations that sustained it began to unravel. Inca royal estates were meant to remain the property of a ruler's mummified body, maintained in perpetuity by his descendants, but resources were finite, and competing heirs may have found it impractical to provision a mountain sanctuary when the empire faced threats closer to Cusco, the capital. Some archaeologists propose that smallpox or other European diseases reached Machu Picchu ahead of Spanish soldiers, spreading through Inca trade networks and devastating populations before direct contact occurred. In this version, the city was abandoned as residents fled contagion or succumbed to it, leaving the terraces to be reclaimed by forest. Another hypothesis suggests political upheaval. The civil war between Atahualpa and Huáscar in the 1520s fractured the empire just as Spanish forces arrived. In the chaos, supply lines to remote sites like Machu Picchu may have collapsed, making the city untenable. Without the organizational infrastructure of the empire, the Amita labor system, the road networks, the redistribution of goods, a settlement perched at 8,000 feet in the cloud forest could not sustain itself. Perhaps the departure was orderly, a managed retreat in which residents carried away everything portable, leaving only the architecture as testimony to what had been. It's worth remembering that the Inca themselves inherited this landscape from earlier peoples. Archaeological evidence places human activity in the Cusco region back thousands of years before the Inca Empire rose to dominance in the 15th century. Some scholars propose that Machu Picchu may have been built atop or near earlier sacred sites, places already charged with meaning long before Pachacuti's masons arrived. The granite outcrop at the site's center, the Intihuatana stone, sometimes called a hitching post of the sun, might have served ceremonial functions for cultures whose names are lost. The Inca were master builders, but they were also inheritors, absorbing and transforming the religious practices and architectural traditions of peoples they incorporated into their expanding empire. In this light, Machu Picchu becomes a palimpsest, a text written over earlier texts, each layer of meaning adding depth without erasing what came before. The city's location between Amazon and Andes, between lowland warmth and highland cold, between the tangible world and the realm of mountain gods called Apus. This placement suggests intentional liminality. Perhaps the site functioned as a meeting ground, a space where different cosmologies overlapped, where priests could read the stars and mountains simultaneously, where the rivers that eventually joined the Amazon began their journey from ice and stone. The terraces themselves hold their own memory. Modern studies of soil composition reveal that earth was imported to create growing surfaces, carried up the mountain to rest on carefully drained stone foundations. The Inca cultivated maize, potatoes, and quinoa on these stepped fields, but also medicinal and ceremonial plants. Botanical analysis of pollen preserved in soil layers suggests cultivation of coca, the sacred leaf that enabled long journeys and spiritual experiences. The agricultural system was not just practical, but symbolic, transforming the mountain into a garden that demonstrated mastery over nature without destroying it. Each terrace was a statement. We can make the vertical horizontal. We can bring fertility to stone. We can coax life from heights where only clouds usually dwell. And perhaps the stones themselves were part of the message. Inca religion recognized the sacred in stone, particularly in rocks of unusual shape or size. The concept of huaca encompassed any object or location charged with supernatural power: a spring, a cave, a mountain peak, or a perfectly fitted wall. At Machu Picchu, the architecture doesn't dominate the landscape, but converges with it. Buildings incorporate natural rock formations into their design. Windows frame sacred peaks. The city grows from the ridge as if the mountain were dreaming itself into terraces and walls. This wasn't conquest of place, but conversation with it, a built environment that listened as much as it spoke. Some researchers examining the site's astronomical alignments propose that Machu Picchu functioned as an astronomical observatory where priest astronomers tracked the sun's path throughout the year. The Intihuatana stone casts precise shadows at solstices and equinoxes, potentially serving as a calendar that guided agricultural decisions and ritual timing. Windows in the Temple of the Sun align with June solstice sunrise, when the first light of winter's shortest day illuminates a ceremonial stone inside. These alignments suggest the city was built not just in space, but in time, oriented toward celestial cycles that ordered Inca understanding of the cosmos. Yet we must be careful not to project our own wonder into claims the evidence cannot support. Modern visitors often describe Machu Picchu as mystical or alien, sometimes speculating about technologies or purposes beyond what 15th century Andean culture possessed. Such speculation ignores the genuine marvel of what the Inca actually achieved through expertise, organization, and profound understanding of their environment. They needed no lost wisdom or outside influence to create Machu Picchu. They needed only their accumulated knowledge of stonework, hydraulics, agriculture, and cosmology. Knowledge built over centuries by cultures that understood survival in the Andes required attention to patterns in stone and sky. The question of why the city was hidden has another dimension. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, at least not by everyone. Perhaps Machu Picchu was hidden even from most Inca citizens, a royal estate accessed only by those with permission, maintained by a select population sworn to service. The remoteness was the point. The difficulty of the journey was part of the experience, a pilgrimage that required leaving the ordinary world behind, ascending through climate zones and cloud layers to reach a place where earth and sky negotiated their boundaries. In this sense, the city was hidden by design, not from future centuries, but from its own time, a deliberate sanctuary beyond the reach of casual approach. Or perhaps the hiding happened slowly, the way all things return to the elements. The jungle hid Machu Picchu the way time hides everything, through the patient accumulation of moss and vines, through the slow effacement of paths, through the forgetting that follows when people move away and carry their stories with them. The city didn't vanish. It remained exactly where it was built, stone on stone, while the human context around it shifted. The hiding was in the forgetting, in the rupture of cultural continuity caused by conquest and disease, in the loss of the oral traditions that would have preserved the site's meaning for descendants who never came. The light begins its descent. What does it mean to build something permanent in a world of change? The question echoes through every empty plaza, every perfectly fitted wall at Machu Picchu. The Inca created architecture designed to outlast them, and it has, but the purpose it served ended long ago. Now the city serves a different function, offering contemporary visitors a glimpse of vanished sophistication, a reminder that civilizations rise and fall, and that stone remembers longer than flesh. Standing in these ruins, or perhaps we should call them remains, a word less broken, we encounter our own temporariness. The terraces that fed hundreds now feed only the imagination. The fountains still flow, but no one performs the rituals they once enabled. The windows frame the same mountains, but the eyes that found meaning in those alignments closed centuries ago. What remains is the conversation between stone and time, the slow dialogue in which weather asks questions and granite provides answers, worn smooth by rain. There's humility in this recognition. We build, and what we build outlasts us, but meaning doesn't survive in stone alone. It requires living transmission, requires people to walk the paths and repeat the stories, requires continuity of culture to maintain the invisible connections that make a city more than an arrangement of blocks. Machu Picchu lost those connections when its population departed. The stones stayed, but the city, the living, functioning city, left with the last footsteps. Yet something persists beyond function. Beauty persists. The way the walls curve with the mountain's contours persists. The precision of joints persists, testifying to values we can still recognize: excellence, patience, attention, respect for material and place. These qualities require no translation. They speak across the 5 centuries of silence, bridging the gap between the hands that shaped the granite and the eyes that now witness what those hands made. Perhaps that's answer enough to why Machu Picchu was built. Not for strategic advantage or economic return, though it may have served those purposes too, but for the same reason humans have always built beyond immediate necessity, to make something that participates in permanence, to take what is given, stone, water, light, and arrange it into an order that reflects understanding. The city was an offering to time itself, a gesture of presence that says we were here. We understood something about proportion and place. We honored the mountain by building with it instead of against it. And why was it hidden? Perhaps because all beautiful things eventually encounter forgetting. Perhaps because civilizations don't end with proclamations, but with the quiet closure of doors, the gradual dispersal of populations, the slow triumph of vines over walls. Perhaps because the hiding is part of the story, the mystery that draws us in and makes us ask questions that have no single answer. The questions themselves become a kind of knowledge. Not knowing exactly why Machu Picchu was abandoned allows space for wonder, prevents the past from calcifying into mere facts. The city remains alive in imagination precisely because it withholds its secrets, because the stones will not speak beyond what can be measured and mapped. The rest, the hopes and fears of the people who lived there, the rituals performed at dawn on terraces that touched clouds, the reasons for the final departure, the rest lives in the space between evidence and speculation, in the territory where history softens into something like myth. Dusk settles over the ridge now. The mist returns, carrying moisture from the forest below, wrapping the terraces in the same softness that has enfolded them for centuries. The stones darken with moisture. Shadows pool in doorways. The light that illuminated fitted walls retreats behind western peaks, leaving the city in the gentle dimness it prefers, the threshold state where edges blur and solid things begin to hint at disappearance. In this hour, it becomes easier to imagine the city as it was. Smoke from cooking fires rising into evening air, voices calling across plazas in a language that survives now only in fragments, the day's work ending and the night's rituals beginning. The imagination is not fact, but neither is it false. It's the mind's way of reaching across the gap, of populating emptiness with possibilities constrained by what is known. We imagine because we are here and they are not, and imagination is the bridge we build toward what has vanished. The Inca who lifted these stones into clouds are gone, but their work remains, and in the presence of that work, we're invited to remember that everything is temporary, except the patterns we make while we're here. Stone by stone, breath by breath, age by patient age. The city was built by hands that understood weight and balance, that knew how to find the grain in granite, that possessed patience, measured not in hours, but in generations. It was built by a civilization sophisticated enough to organize labor across vast distances, to engineer water systems that still function, to align architecture with astronomy, to transform a mountain ridge into a statement about humanity's place in a cosmos that includes earth and sky and the sacred peaks between. It was hidden by time, by distance, by jungle, by the rupture of conquest, by the forgetting that follows when one world ends and another begins without bothering to preserve what came before. It was hidden by its own design, meant for few, built in a place difficult to reach. It was hidden in plain sight for generations, while local people cultivated its terraces and travelers passed nearby without recognizing what they saw. And now it's found again, though what has been found is not what was lost. We see the stones, but not the ceremonies. We walk the paths, but not toward the purposes that once gave those paths meaning. We see the architecture, but not the cosmology it embodied. What we find is incomplete. And the incompleteness teaches something too, that the past is not a place we can visit, only a place toward which we can turn our attention, gathering fragments and arranging them into narratives that satisfy our need for stories. The darkness deepens. One by one, the terraces fade into night. The fitted walls become suggestions in shadow. The mountains that witnessed the city's construction, its brief flourishing, its long abandonment. These mountains settle into the silhouette they've held for millions of years, a rhythm in which 500 years of human absence barely registers. And perhaps that's the final answer, or the only answer. The stones remain. The mountains remain. The water still flows through channels carved for purposes we can guess, but never fully know. Machu Picchu remains less hidden now than in centuries past, but still holding its secrets in the spaces between blocks, in the silence of empty rooms, in the question that hovers over terraces where no smoke rises. Who built this city? People did. People with names and families and the same capacity for vision and labor that humans have always possessed. Why was it hidden? Because everything returns to the elements, because forgetting follows living, because the jungle is patient and time is long. And what remains when the builders and their purposes have vanished? Beauty remains. The patient genius of fitted stone remains. The mystery remains, and the invitation to wonder. The stars appear overhead, The same stars the Inca watched from these terraces, though we call them by different names now, though we fit them into different stories. The stones rest beneath those stars, holding their shape, holding their silence. Everything waits in the dark. The mountain breathes. The city dreams. And we, for a moment, remember.